Hello everyone, welcome. This is PHPalDeej doing another deck tech. We have Korozda Guildmage here. This is one of my personal favorites, and of my play group, you either really love this deck or you really hate it. Kind of a recurring theme with my decks. I have a very specific strategy I'm trying to employ here, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first line of text we mostly ignore. I use it sometimes, probably use it maybe once a game, so it's not too bad, but it's definitely not the focus of the deck. Giving creature intimidate's pretty cool. Pumping up by +1's nice. If you have extra mana, sometimes you can like hit up your opponent's creatures and they'll be able to do some evasive plays, like attacking someone other than you. That could be political, a little play you could do. That's nice. But the real kicker is the second ability. You spend 4 mana, 1 of each and 2, to sacrifice a non-token creature you have, and you get X 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens onto the battlefield, equal to the number, equal to that creature's toughness. So, for example here, this isn't like my normal setup where I have, this thematic thing I'm trying to justify. Really, it's just any of these could be placeholders. These 2 cards on the side could be any 2 things. But the point is, we play some little baby creature that doesn't cost much or is efficient in some way that has high toughness. Traproot Kami is really nice if there's other people at the table who are green decks with forests in play. But the goal is, if you're doing it yourself, it's going to be like a 0/3 or a 0/4. You're going to pay 1 green mana. And what you're going to do is you're going to go and start it off. So when someone threatens to kill your commander, threatens you in some way, or once you're ready, you go ahead and you sack your dude. For 4 mana, you get 4 1/1s in this case. There's plenty of other good options. Things like Shield Sphere. For 0 mana, you get a 0/6. Probably a better example for this, where in this case, you would sack a 0/6 that you paid 0 mana for to get 6 1/1s. That's great. But at the end of the day, like 4 1/1 tokens for 6 mana in 1 card, that's about average. That's not anything too crazy. But it gets crazy when you have this little interaction. There's a handful of these creatures that all have this exact same effect. Sacrifice a creature. This card gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This functionally doubles your tokens. If you have the mana to activate this, the turn you sack all your sapperlings. In this situation, if I a turn earlier or I had the mana to do both in 1 turn, I would have 6 1/1s. I would sack 6 1/1s to Bloodbaron. He would become a 14/14, getting +12/+12 from the ability and his 2. Then you would sack him for 14 1/1s. So with your commander and tokens, you're able to double with these guys. That's the play. So if I draw multiples of these, or if I'm able to recur them from the grave, then I'm able to turn, in this case, 14 tokens. Again, I would turn that into 28 plus 2. I'd get 30 tokens after that. So there's so many ways to just ramp out the tokens. And that's the theme. So let's go and hop right into it. So to continue on this initial theme, so these are the guys that their job is just to be things you sack with basically nothing else other than it's a lot of toughness for 1 card for cheap. In that category, we have just buffing cards, actually. Slagworm Armor. For 1 card, you're spending 4 mana total to give a creature +0/+6. So you could easily use a Shield Sphere and a Slagworm to get 12 tokens, which is really great. And the best thing about Slagworm is, yeah, it's not a creature itself you can sack, but once you're sacking again, whatever you plan on sacking in the future, you can just go ahead and slap this on that creature. Not only will it protect it until the turns you're ready to do your explosive play, but also, again, once you're sacking again, once you're using Korozda's commander to double your tokens, you're getting more and more value every time. So this helps you just turn your mana into tokens. Spider Silk Armor is, you pay the mana once, and you're only getting 1 more token, 1 more toughness, but giving all your creatures reach is nice, and I've said this in all my green decks, this is basically a staple for the format. It's, no matter how much you want to cut it, you can't. And in this deck, it actually has some real value where, yeah, in the very least, you're getting extra tokens and you're giving a keyword to your creatures that you do have. So for the main strategy, like I said, we have Bloodbaron. This is one of the mediocre ones where we have, looks like 5 total that cost 3 mana that all do the same thing. There's subtle differences here. This is another creature. This is any creature you would never sack itself, so it doesn't matter. This one costs 2 mana instead of 3. This one costs 3. This one only sacks sapperlings for +1/+2, which is something I didn't mention earlier. what you can do is you can just attack with these guys, and if it goes unblocked, then that's when you can just go ahead and sack, do a giant like 30 damage hit, and then by the end of the turn, you sack him for all the tokens. So you basically just absorb the downside. You don't really get that with this guy, except for the whole unblocked thing, because he only gets +1/+2. But yeah, he gets the bigger butt, so when you sacrifice him, you double your tokens, so that's his value. And then Vampire Aristocrat, same thing. And all these cost 3 mana except for Blood Throne. And that matters in just the unique case with Shred Memory. Almost always you're going to use Shred Memory's Transmute to search for Blood Throne, because these are really the backbone of your deck. And honestly, this deck, I could do a little bit more work on it to focus more on, once you get one of these guys, just recurring it over and over and over again. I do have a few recursion effects, but I probably could be more aggressive with it. But yeah, so Shred Memory will search for that. There is one more I'm testing. I actually haven't successfully done it, but if I do explosive turns, this also doubles, but I would have to, instead of sacking the creature, it's when the creatures come into play. So if I have a turn where I'm able to do this twice, I can, let's just say I have 10 tokens. I could sacrifice 10 tokens, so he would become a 22/22. That turn, he would also become a 22/22. So I could pay the mana to sack him for 22 tokens, and then sack those again to this. So it's functionally the same thing as having drawn 2 of these and spending the mana that way. But this, it's on trigger, so it's kind of more efficient, but you have to do both in the same turn. So we'll see how this actually plays out. It's just an extra one, and getting that +2/+2 instead of a lot of these other cards get +1/+1, that's extremely good value. So that's the core of the deck, or all these cards. And the fact there's so many cards that are functional reprints is huge for this strategy. So now we have payoff cards, and a lot of these cards I can call payoff, but these are ones that specifically get bigger when you do the core strategy. So as I'm doing that strategy where I'm sacking all those tokens to pump, this guy will just get bigger. So for everything I sack, I'm getting +1/+1. Exact same thing here. Specifically, this says when a creature you control dies. This says the creature has to be sacked. So as long as I'm doing the strategy, there's no difference. There's some situations where you get some differences. This is a newer card of the deck. I love this card, because yeah, you can just exploit it like it's supposed to be played. It gets a +1/+1 and it gains haste, and you just have a hasty flyer. For 5, it's pretty expensive, but all these stats, all these abilities, and just being able to sneak in with the flyer is incredible. Yeah, and if you have a turn where you're going off, it's really nice to pump up some other creature, and then this guy also comes in for like 12 or 20 damage, or however far along you are in the combo. So the fact that he's flying means that damage is going to go through. Mortician Beetle used to be a rare, now is a common. And whenever any player sacrifices a creature, so if you, I mean, I don't actually run Innocent Blood, but if somebody plays an Innocent Blood, then he would get +4/+4. Sadistic Glee is the enchantment version of this. It's really great to put this on one of these creatures, because on any of these creatures, because it basically turns them into these original ones that get +2/+2. So you're able to get that extra value. Or of course you can put it on one of these guys and they get +3/+3. But they're counters, so that's something to keep in mind. Sign of the Wild's another rare that got downshifted to common. One of the craziest cards in this deck. His power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures you control. So when you go wide with the tokens, that's when he's good. Not when you do the big sack. It's once they're all transformed into tokens. And that's another key thing to keep in mind with this deck, is if you have the mana opened, you can constantly expand and contract as long as you have the creatures on board. If someone wants to Doomblade something or use a board wipe, let's just say someone does an Evankar's Justice to do 2 damage to all creatures. Well, in response, you can sack them all onto one creature. Ideally, Korozda would need to have a bigger butt so that he could live the Evankars. But yeah, you can sack all the creatures to one of the creature doublers, the token doublers, and that'll survive the Evankars. And then afterwards, you sack it to Korozda. There are a few ways where you Korozda, like for example, you could just use his commander, use his ability to give him +1/+1. There's a handful of ways you could protect him in a situation like that. And then the last of the big payoff cards is Ivy Lane Denizen. Again, this is only good as the creatures come in, just like Herdnar. But it's tokens, and if you want, you can stack them all in the same creature. So this is like Sadistic Glee, where as the creatures are coming in, you can just put all the tokens on one dude. Or, in plenty of situations, this is the right play, you put the +1/+1s on the tokens themselves, if you're afraid of dying to 1 damage to all your creatures at once. This is a good enough segue for me to mention one of my favorite little card combos, Wirewood Herald. This is when he dies, you search your library for an elf and put it in your hand. Ivy Lane Denizen is an incredible target for this, so I would almost always choose this first. But the original play, and I do this in a lot of my decks, is Fierce Empath. Fierce Empath is an elf. You're doing this extremely slow mana dump to get one of these two. I could do my other favorite creature. I can't remember what it's called now. I call it the Fireball on Legs, the one with Riot. But in this deck, it's pretty tight, and I'm trying to force so many themes at once. Probably could optimize a little bit, but I like the way it is right now, and we're not really there right now. I've been working on this deck for a few years now, making little change every time I work on it. But we have Fangor Marauder and Orchard Elemental. They're just incredible healing cards, and they're also big. So, you know, it doesn't really matter necessarily if the creature has a cheap CMC for the toughness. If you wait enough turns, slamming down a Fangor Marauder, that is, you know, if everyone stacks their artifacts, you're gaining life. You have plenty of artifacts that could be dying on your own that you could be sacking yourself to just gain life. That's just incremental value. And then if anyone threatens to kill it, which in a lot of cases people do, you sack it in response for 5 tokens. That's a really good place to start off your loop. You just want some beefy creature. It doesn't really matter what turn you are on the game. The goal is for it to cost less, but if you're doing it in response to something, that's also important. Orchard Elemental. This is supposed to be a healing card. In this deck, a lot of times people prefer to put the counters because they'll say, oh, put the counters on, I can just chump block it for days, or I'll just Doomblade it or murder it. In this case, it's a really tough choice because if you just take the tokens, then yeah, I'm going to turn into more tokens. If you just give me the counters, I'm just going to make it into tokens. But if you gain me life, then I'm getting what I want. So yeah, perhaps the correct place for everyone to gain me life, but then hey, I played a 6 mana creature that I can block with or recur later with creature recursion, and I gained 12 life. Like that's a really great value. So that's a part of my creature loop or creature suite. And again, since we're talking about segues, like I said, we have this Wirewood Herald searching for Ivy Lane Denizen or Fierce Empath, and the Fierce Empath searches for one of these two. But there's a third card, and that's because this deck is so compact, we have Eyeblight's Ending as a part of my removal, of my card removal cards. It is an elf card. So when Wirewood Herald dies, if I have a sack outlet at instant speed, I'm able to search my deck for Eyeblight's Ending to destroy target non-elf creature. So basically this I make count as 2 removal spells so I can feel like I have interaction, even though I run a lot less than I probably should. I figure people should be interacting with me, not really the other way around. But yeah, since we started talking about removal, let's just go ahead and go in this category. Lignify, with our format, it's extremely useful to not only just destroy a creature, but to just turn off their abilities. If you destroy a commander, they're able to recast it. It's more useful to just keep them alive. And honestly, in very obscure scenarios, you could just enchant your own creature because this makes a 0/4. If you wanted to, you can enchant one of your smaller creatures to give it more toughness, so you could sack it to Korozda to make tokens. I don't know if I've ever done that, but it's technically a valid play. For single target removal, this isn't creature removal, but I still consider them single target. Steel Primordium and Wickerbot Elder, same category as each other, where they're just open information, artifact, enchantment, destruction. This is one of my favorite cards in the format. I've said this in every deck tech I've made so far. This and Seal of Cleansing. I run them in basically every deck I make. The point is people aren't going to mess with you. They know that you're going to threaten to blow up their artifact or enchantment, their one key thing they're happy with right now. So they're just not going to take you as an aggressor. So the threat of activating this is way better than just spending 2 mana to sorcery speed, destroy something. Wickerbot Elder, similar. You have to pay 1 mana and it's -1/-1 counters. But again, after you activate it, after you destroy it, you paid 4 mana for a 4-buck creature. You're able to later sacrifice it to Korozda. So all these things are like slow, grindy plays that allow you to build up value, to amass a bunch of tokens. We have Pestilence in the scenario where my board is already wiped, which is a bad situation, but Pestilence is always a fallback. If you've been ramping up the entire game, you're able to just dump mana. It is a board wipe, but it's also a way to kill people. In this deck, like I said, you're capable of putting all your tokens into one of your into your token doublers. They get all the stats. Then you Pestilence as much as you can. And if Korozda lived, then you're able to sack that doubler afterward. So you get all the benefits of Pestilence with none the downside. It takes a little bit of work, but Pestilence is good enough that you can just put it in. It's an AoE fireball. And in this scenario, I considered it removal. So now we have, back on track, another suite of enablers. I didn't really know exactly where to put these. These are just cards that are really, really great with the strategy we're doing. Cards you want in play or in hand when you're doing the creature doubling. Wart Eye Witch, love this card. I instantly knew it needed to go in this deck when it was printed. Whenever it or another creature I control dies, I scry one. So when I'm doing my thing, I'm incidentally digging through 10, 20, 30, 40 cards in my deck. I just basically tutor for whatever I want and put it on top. That's insane. And yeah, worst case scenario, I just have a 3/2 for 3. It's not really good for sacking a Korozda because the stats are bad for that, but if it itself dies, it scries, so it's great. Death Greeter, I'm constantly trying to cut this, but it's just so dumb. I cannot cut it. It's too good for this kind of strategy. Before I was running all of the Soul Sisters, which was, I guess, the other Soul Sister, which was Essence Warden. Perhaps I should, just because it's really good. It just doesn't fit the theme. I'm never going to sack it. It just chills and watches me do my thing. My favorite thing about it is if someone's threatening to destroy me, I'm not just trying to put creatures in play. It's much easier for me to sack all my creatures in response to something than it is for me to do my whole combo and then make a whole bunch of stuff. So I chose Death Greeter over Essence Warden. And it's very good, very good. You have extremely explosive healing turns with this. Same thing goes with Falkenrath Noble, which was the biggest justification as to why I couldn't cut Death Greeter. This is so insanely good for the healing alone that it justified Death Greeter, but being able to ping anyone every time a creature dies. You do these explosive turns where, yeah, it's basically giving all your creatures +1/+0 when they enter the battlefield. It's or when you sack them, but same thing in this deck, basically. Blunt the Assault. When I do my big expansion part of the combo, I can go wide with a bunch of tokens, perhaps in response to an attack. Maybe I'm doing it to block even. In this case, Blunt the Assault would be a really great way to not block and just, yeah, gain life equal to the number of tokens and also fog. I wouldn't die that turn. This card's insanely good. And it's one of the primary cards I search for with my other Transmute. I only run 2 Transmutes in this deck. Dimir House Guard. It'll search for this, or it'll search for a card I'll show in a bit that I basically run as a 2-card combo in every black deck, Siphon Mind. So these 2 cards are like the biggest like gotcha I win right now cards. Might of the Masses says target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. So when I do my big expansion part of the combo, I target my creature, it gets huge, and then I sack all those creatures to make it even bigger. So I'm able to either sneak in that combat damage if I'm in the middle of combat, or it's just another way to generate even more tokens. For 1 mana to make even more tokens, it's absolutely insane. Gruesome Fate is, yeah, part of the expansion part of the combo as well. Each opponent loses 1 life for each creature you control. This can sometimes just instantly win the game, 3v1. I've definitely had some really great victories with this. Yeah. There is another one I could be running. It says for each creature that attacks, defending player loses 1, and that would be just as good, but I've since taken it out because I don't necessarily like to swing with all the tokens. It's definitely a valid strategy to go that direction, though. Cards I didn't really have a really good category for. Sprout Swarm. Perfect for our strategy if we're just dirtling, wasting time. One of the things is you don't have to just go for your combo as fast as possible. You just want to keep mana open every turn. So if you can, you'll just Sprout Swarm to blow up that mana every turn, just to get more and more tokens. You're getting incrementally more value. Sprout Swarm is also a really valid way to close out grindy games. So this is just a nice fit in the deck. Cards that protect my commander that don't necessarily want to blow my mana. Broken Fall, staple in green decks. You just return it back to your hand to regenerate commander. In this case, Dark Privilege is similar. It's almost exactly as good because I have plenty of spare tokens floating around. I can always just sack them. And yeah, it makes my commander bigger for situations like Pestilence and Evan cards, like I was saying earlier. But these are both just for the regeneration effect. We have a little bit of recursion and Disturb Burial, if you have the mana, can recur things over and over and over again. Rarely do you just have free reign over your graveyard when no one's threatening to exile your grave. But in the cases you do, you're happy to take the time, take the turns to dump the mana to get more creature doublers. You'll just keep on doing it over and over again. If people let you sit pretty, you'll just go wide to the point where it's like no one can handle it. Pulsar Marasa and Evolution Charm, I run these in a lot of my decks. I think Pulsar Marasa is basically a staple. You gain 6 life for 3 minutes. Very good. You maintain card advantage. If you need a land, if there's one in the grave, that's cool. But yeah, for the most part, you're going to return a creature at instant speed. So if someone's threatening to blow up your grave, you're like, hey, I have Pulse, I'll get it back in response. So it itself plays around the grave bombs. And the same can be said of Evolution Charm, which can also search your deck for a land when you're in dire need, or give a creature flying if you're doing one of those big pump turns. Now we have grave bombs that I'll segue into draw cards. Tormods, someone needs a grave bomb. It needs to be in play so that you can threaten people with their crazy value turns. So I run the 2 that you run in every deck, or should be run in every deck, and then Nihil, which should be in every black deck. Just grave bombs. These 2 I count as draw because they technically are. They cycle themselves with extra value along the way. So definitely really nice. I run not too much draw. A lot of these cards have draw built in, so when I need them, they'll draw. But the cards that just plain draw, Night's Whisper, 2 mana. I run this one in particular because it's 1 black and 1 because I'm a 2-color deck. I'm pretty split on the CMC, on the distribution of green and black mana. So it's nice to just have early draw that doesn't cost much mana. And yeah, draw 2, lose 2 life. Read the Bones is the only 3 mana cost one that does the same thing, just because it's so much better than all the others. Scry 2, and then you draw 2, lose 2. So this is incredible card selection. And Siphon Mind, this is the card I was saying I would transmute for with the Dimir House Guard. Yeah, it's one of the best draw cards in the whole format, definitely in black. Maybe only a few exceptions in blue. But yeah, it says each opponent discards a card, and you draw for each card discarded. So basically always draw 3 for 4 mana, and it also hurts your opponents, which is really, really great. We're in this last section before we hit the lands. And this is mana acceleration. So a lot of these are creatures, and these are the ones that are perfect for this strategy. I honestly wish there was more functional reprints of these cards. But we have Vine Trellis, Wall of Roots, and Overgrown Battlement. These are great because the turn you're sacking the creature, you don't care if you're tapping them or whatever, you're using for whatever abilities they have. They say tap for mana, which helps you do your Korozda Guildmage ability sooner, and they're really great ways to start your combo. Not only does it accelerate the timeline for your combo, but yeah, they're what you would sack. It's just, yeah, it's perfect. So a lot of these other creature ramps are not necessarily the best ramp cards, but they're ones I particularly like, or they have big butts, so they're perfect for the strategy. This is the first category, things I just plain like. Avenging Druid and Centaur Rootcaster. We have an honorable mention that's off screen at all times, Hunting Cheetah, that I could squeeze in this deck. I love this card, but the color fixing is nice, so that's why I've opted into these 2. Avenging Druid's good because you do have a few graveyard strategies, so it's not a big deal to mill yourself. The land also comes into play. It can be any land, so you mill until you hit any land, it comes into play. Sometimes you could be going for a pinch Bojuka Bog, and that's just the play. Yeah, and during combat you could hit a Bojuka Bog. That's something that's totally valid. Centaur Rootcaster, same thing. When either of them deal damage, combat damage, then you search your deck for a basic land you put into play tapped. So I love these cards because they're repeatable card advantage, they're repeatable ramp. And yeah, it's actually, these are the only real cards that I use the first ability for consistently, where I'll intentionally give these cards Intimidate and just attack the person who can't block my my green creatures, just to get repeated value. We have Ondu Giant and Silverglade Elemental. You know, you're only getting 1 land out of these cards, and in Silverglade Elemental's situation, it's just a forest. But you don't mind, it's +1 mana, and you're getting a creature that you're happy to sack to Korozda. You're not necessarily going to, like, Silverglade's a 4/4, you might just swing with it over and over again until someone threatens to kill it or threatens to block it, and that's when you sack it. The way you're supposed to play this deck is you keep your mana open so you're able to do things reactively, so no one can ever stop you, as long as you have enough mana. So now we're getting to the mana rocks. Mindstone fits in the category of filler draw cards when you need it. It's just a really great mana rock. A lot of people argue it's the best one. Just really great. 2 mana for +1 mana. So we have the original PDH staples, Pristine Talisman and Orozco Relic. They both gain life. Orozco Relic draws a card. There's just no complaints to be had here. Mana rocks are just always good, and these have extra value beyond that. Commander Sphere is one of the best mana rocks in Commander, obviously. Same thing as Orozco, you're able to sack it to draw a card, and you can get any color mana, so it is color fixing as well. The lockets are insanely good. I run Golgari Locket because it's a +2 draw. I'm not the biggest fan of the lockets in decks that have black, but yeah, the point of this deck is that everything's pulling double duty. So once I'm later in the game, like of course I could always use more mana, but if I'm out of cards, I'd rather not miss a land drop and just go ahead and draw. So that's the real function of the locket. But when it comes to missing land drops, nothing is happier. There's nothing you're happier to see than Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. Probably the best ramp spells in the history of Magic. They're perfect. You get +1 ramp, and you guarantee you won't miss your land drop. It's +1 card advantage. They're just incredible cards. So that's it for the ramp. That's actually everything that is a non-land. We'll go ahead and hit the lands real quick. We have Bojuka Bog. Goes in every black deck, basically. It's another Grave Bomb, and this one's pretty incidental, so there's no downside. We have Command Tower as a dual land that comes into play untapped. These three dual lands that come into play tapped. They're just dual lands. One gives you life, but again, you want the flexibility, so you're happy for them to come and play tapped. Colony Garden is really good in this deck because you make a token that you're able to sack for extra value later, so basically no downside. Haunted Fengraf is another one of your form of recursion. I used to run Crop Rotation in this deck. I recently took it out, and that was actually another card I considered creature recursion. It's not necessarily the best because you're not necessarily going to get the creature you want, but just getting something back in the late stages of the game is really, really great. Mortuary Mire, this is also creature recursion. I did intend to put in the new Eldraine card that does the same thing. It's not in the current list, but obviously you can take out a basic land for it or whatever. But this is really nice because if you get a token doubler, that's the kind of card you'd want to put on top of your library. Opal Palace, good as ever. You cast your commander plenty of times if people are going to kill it. Some situations you even sack your commander on purpose, just make 1 or 2 or 3 tokens. So if you're casting commander over and over again, it itself becomes a really great candidate for making 1/1 tokens. We have the bounce lands. I love these things. You can keep aggressive hands that have fewer lands because you get 1 extra land drop for free. Ash Barrens, I don't actually run this card in that many decks, but I never took it out of this one, and it's never really served me bad, so it's still here. Critically Accursed, not necessarily the kind of thing we're trying to do. We're not necessarily trying to go minus lands for a token, but if you're trying to do an aggressive play, you could turn a 2/2 into +2/+2 to make more 1/1s. It's weird, it's slow, but it's nice to protect you from grave bombs. And yeah, of course, you could have these aggressive turns or set up turns before aggressive turns that give you extra tokens, so it has value. And after that, we have a pretty much 50-50 split for swamps and forests. That's what we're working with here. A key note is I actually run 38 lands in this deck, which is more than a lot of decks, but I've never really regretted it. Because, yeah, you're just happy to stall out and not miss land drops every turn. So that's Korozda Guildmage. Really glad you guys stuck around to watch it. Been meaning to make these videos for a while. I really love this deck, and thanks for watching. See you later.